panel today, our panel member to my immediate left is Sharyn O'Neill, Public Sector Commissioner. Lanie Chopping on the other end of the panel, who's the Director General of Department of Local Government, Industry Regulation and Safety. And in the middle, we've got Andrew Salter, who's the Executive Director of Professional Standards at the Department of Communities. So I'm going to ask each panel member to sort of introduce themselves, any initial reflections on the state of integrity in their agency or across the sector, and then we'll move to some questions, and then your questions after that, which we're really keen to get to. So over to you first. Thanks, Sharyn.
Okay, good morning everyone. Can you hear me well enough? Sharyn O'Neill, Public Sector Commissioner. I've been in this role for about 6 years, I think. In fact, we had a quiz the other day and my team had to work out what was my day of appointment, and even I got it wrong. So there you go. Before that, long-term head of Department of Education for more than 12 years. And yeah, I have a real interest, obviously, in integrity in this role. We have responsibility under Corruption and Crime Act for minor misconduct, but having been long-term head of education with 800 sites, you know, more than 60,000 staff, got to touch on integrity issues a lot. So I feel like I've seen it all, but apparently I haven't, because it comes up every day. I'll pass to someone else while I choke.
Some water, thank you. Andrew.
Cool, thank you. And I think everyone can hear me as well. I can kind of hear my own echo a little bit. Thanks for the opportunity. Thanks for coming along today. I'm the Executive Director, Professional Standards with Department of Communities. So I oversee all of our integrity functions, prevention, education, the discipline responses, but I've also got all of our audit, risk, external complaints, and a few other bits and pieces as well. So it's a fairly comprehensive role, and one where the areas do actually link in. So if we identify a bit of an issue, we are fortunate that we have, audit and risk there, so we can go and have a look and how much of a risk is it, and do some audit, some compliance activity as well, and see whether our concerns are justified or not, and sometimes the other way around as well. I've been with communities for about 4.5 years. I have a very varied background. Before that, I was actually with Justice in a prevention education role, equivalent to Tina's role over there with communities. And before that, I guess a whole range of things, but I do have a public health background, which I've found for the integrity function to be really, really, really useful. It's been a great resource for myself, feeding up originally when I was coming into this space, but also feeding down to staff as well. Public health is really about changing behaviour, skills, knowledge, attitude, and using lots of different strategies to try and achieve that outcome, which is essentially what integrity prevention education is about, as Mel will say, with the many resources that the PSC have available. Similar to Sharyn, even though I've been doing this now for probably about 6 years all up, I still get surprised with what people do. There's always an interesting week. Some weeks there's always an interesting day. But I guess essentially integrity for me or our function is really around trying to build positive workplace culture. Somewhere where we have a really positive, integrity-led approach ends up being a much happier workplace. People understand what their role is, they know what's expected, people get along, they do the right thing, and you end up with a positive workplace. And for us in human services, that means better outcomes for the clients as well, which is really, really important. It's essentially why we get paid. I think for communities as well, the obvious elephant in the room, we have done, I think we've done a really good job over the last couple of years, or the last handful of years, in developing up systems, processes, education responses, the whole risk audit, governance approach. Prior to that, why does communities have an integrity function? I think that kind of goes without saying. And I think our DG, when he did start, said, I never want to mention that person's name ever while I'm in this role. And it's like, got a feeling you're probably going to have to. It's going to come up. But in terms of I guess ultimately what Mike as DG was trying to say was, I want to focus on the positive. I don't want to look backwards. Yes, we did have some issues. Yes, we've got a long way to go, but let's focus going forward. Let's focus on the positive and try and build that culture and build that integrity across the department.
Thanks, Emma. So I'm Lanie Chopping. I'm the Director General of Local Government Industry Regulation and Safety, which has been in existence for we're just about to have our 6-month birthday. So 5.5 months. I've just come from doing my Christmas town hall meeting, and I get to do that 3 times because of how big we are. It's prior to that, I was the Director General of Department of Local Government, Sport and Cultural Industries, and I just celebrated my 20-year anniversary for working with the WA Public Service in lots of different roles, but the thing that has bound them together has been predominantly a regulatory focus. So I think for the state of integrity for me, for my department at the moment, we're newly formed. Half of the department, or a part of the department, I'm very familiar with because they came over with me, the racing, gaming and liquor and the local government parts of our organisation. Super familiar with those portfolios and know the players, know the people in those portfolios. The rest of the department is a remnant of Demir's and was the department that I left in 2021 to go to DLGSC. But a lot changes in 4 or 5 years in the state public service, as you all know. And so in some ways it's like going back to the beginning from an integrity point of view, understanding the different cultures that exist within the department and the approach to integrity. I think my corporate services, and I don't know if there's anyone, hopefully there's someone here from, this would be a good test, is there someone here from Algiers that I just haven't seen yet?
Oh, thank God.
Thank goodness.
We'll give her your name later.
So I think the prevailing factor for me in the current arrangement is the people who I had worked with in the previous Demir's part of the business. Everyone's really, really at pains to point out how good they are at everything. We've got this. We've totally got this. Got it. Nothing to see. You're all good. Everything's great. All good. All good. The people that I've brought with me, who I also brought my Director of Integrity with me, Michael Palermo, who some of you may know, who's on a transition to retirement. So he's been with me for 4 or 5 years. I was saying, is it true that they've got this and everything's okay? Because whenever anyone tells me that they've got this and it's all okay, I get kind of like, spidey senses. So I'm in a very early part of a journey, and maybe there'll be a question later where I can talk about the journey at DLGSC, which is a similar journey in the sense that people want to talk about the Royal Commission and that kind of scenario. So I won't elaborate on that now.
All right, well, thank you all for that useful introduction. Might go now to a question about resilience. And so in your experience, and you've worked across different departments, each of you, what distinguishes agencies that are resilient to misconduct from those that are more vulnerable?
From my perspective, sorry about the little interlude earlier. Might happen again, I don't know. From my perspective, it's something about normalising the discussion and the practices around integrity. So when I first came to the Public Sector Commission and looked across the sector, there was a lot of excitement when something goes wrong. Names not to be mentioned, obviously. Panic, excitement, terrible, lots of attention, lots of activity, and then this kind of drop off, and everyone else is just going, thank God it wasn't us, So I see other things across the sector dealt with much more strategically, whether it's at the executive level, and I'll talk a bit about that later perhaps, plans, frameworks, approaches. Whereas in integrity, it's you good folk battling it out over there, doing great stuff, but it's not necessarily taken from a holistic strategic perspective. So one of the first things my terrific team did across the sector is we put together a strategy that had a model in it that was thoughtful, that drew on national, international research, and said, here are all the things you need to think about, not just the, oh my God, someone's done something terrible. You know, the prevention stuff, the education stuff, the culture stuff, all the things we're going to talk about today. So we declared, here's a model, and you need to worry about it all. And then we required for the first time a comprehensive framework, which meant that you had to connect all of the pieces, because integrity is not just you people in a corner doing something, it's everyone, right? So I think agencies that are more resilient have highly planned, well executed, well informed, executive level buy-in to the whole thing from top to bottom, and we'll talk a bit more over time, I guess, about that. And then we gave you a maturity assessment tool to keep coming back all of the time and to have a plan for improvement. No one had a plan for improvement in integrity. And so I think a resilient organisation has the structures, the systems, the processes around integrity, like it would for procurement, like it would for HR, like it does for finance. You look at corporate executive, we talk a lot about finance, we don't talk much about integrity. So I think resilience is not only about the people and the speak up, I mean, obviously all of that, but it's having a mature, structured approach, deliberate approach to integrity in your agency, and that's how you build any form of resilience as an individual and as an organisation, is to be disciplined, know what you're about, drive, and then drive again.
Lanie?
I think, so I'm really grateful, I was really grateful that the integrity framework and all of the scaffolding that PSC has supported the sector with came out at a time for me when I was starting in my first Director General job in the middle of an integrity related crisis, really. And so the scaffolding and putting all of that in place has meant that we're kind of, I feel well grounded from a policies, procedures, processes, training, all of those kinds of things. There's still more to do and we can't let that ever slip. I think, but for me in the leadership context, the culture at the leadership level that we set for the organisation and the approach that we take with each other, there's some really important elements for me in that. And really my experience in that space has been about being willing to, whatever level people are at in the organisation, being willing to speak up and speak out about something that they see, because integrity is everybody's business. I know that sounds like a throwaway comment, but I'll give you an example where I've been surrounded often by management teams or executives that have a huge optimism bias towards thinking the best of people. And normally I have an optimism bias towards things like delivery and stuff like, we can do this, we can make this happen, but I've got the reverse of that when it comes to humans. I like to think the best of people, but I also understand that it's important to question and think the worst. So an example of where that shows up, recently in starting this new role, I've asked to see all of the conflict of interest declarations and management plans from all of my direct reports, of which people found it quite difficult to actually find those within our IT system. So that's a whole other issue about how ready we are to talk to our management plans. But by and large, the response of executives coming to those meetings was, it's all good. I've done all my declarations and here's my management plan and nothing more to say. And I said, okay, well, let's have a discussion about the management plan. And he said, well, I've got a management plan, it's fine, I feel comfortable with it. And I said, well, that's good that you feel comfortable with it, but I think what we need to talk about here is whether we both feel comfortable about it. Because if your husband owns shares in these 10 companies and you think you can still make regulatory decisions about those 10 companies, I'm here to tell you that I don't think that passes the pub test. And it's not up to you to feel comfortable, it's up to us to feel comfortable about the management plan. So I think this is one example of where these are things that frameworks, they're different to frameworks. It's about the way of being with each other, and that's not just at the executive level, it's at a cultural level across the agency.
And how do you go about creating that culture of accountability at all levels, but also a place where people feel comfortable speaking up? How do you go about that, or how have you gone about that?
I think I can think of an example of where I toured on a bus with my previous corporate executive. We went to a site that we owned And we all got back on the bus afterwards and they were all like, oh, it's so fantastic, it's so great, and they're doing this. And I was like, but did you hear when we asked the question about the accommodation and the caretaker said, well, they could only live there if they were related to me? I said, what do you think is wrong with that? Yeah. So then helping people get to the aha moment, I see as being a role for people in this room and for us in executive leadership positions. It's really, really important that we facilitate a deeper discussion with people so that we can all get to it's great, the activities are fantastic, that's all fantastic, but what's actually going on underneath? So I think facilitating discussions with people, but having a speak up culture, it can be difficult, particularly when the people that you're wanting to speak up to are in more senior roles or in your line role.
I think that the speak up culture is really important, and importantly asking ourselves the questions why people don't want to do it. And one is the power imbalance. We introduced Safe to Say, and I think some other agencies have, so you can take away some of that power imbalance. But the psychology of people is really relevant here to understand, there's fear. People do think the best in other people. Most often they've got one piece of information. They often know they haven't got all of the information, so they're worried about, perhaps if could be other things going on I don't really know about. So I think taking the time to understand a bit more about why people don't want to do that. It's often someone they know, the friendships. So having things in place that, it's not enough just to have a morning tea and say to everyone, speak up, speak up.
Yeah.
Just the basic psychology. You've got a lot of introverts, in any workplace. So there's a whole lot of other reasons. Just general confidence. Work on people's confidence to speak up about anything, let alone an integrity issue. People are afraid to raise, counter views. I think we've got a whole policy issue in the public sector where people are concerned about raising another view because they feel the executive or the team leader's already made their mind up. So I think working on speaking up generally, not just for integrity, but particularly, with a focus on integrity, is really important. And there's a lot of culture work, and we're going to bring forward some work next year around culture, not specific to integrity, but of course involves integrity, which will talk about trust at 3 levels: personal trust. Do I trust you not to, knock me off for saying something bad? Organisational trust. Do the systems and processes in the organisation facilitate trust? And strategic trust. Do I trust my leader to deal with this? Because one of the worst things in trust is when people don't take action. There is no consequence for someone raising something, and I think that's really detrimental. So it's very complex. It's not just a morning tea and telling people louder, speak up, speak up, speak up. It's much more complex than that, and I think we've got a lot of work to keep going in that area.
And Andrew, I know at Communities you've been involved in sort of building that professional standards capability. Could you talk a bit about how you went about that, and also the sort of prevention work that you do at Communities, but also this cultural piece about getting people to report?
Cool, thanks Emma. I was going to say, I'm not sure what I was going to answer to the resilience, because everything that Lanie and Sharyn said. We have a strategy, a framework, all of the policies, procedures, all of that. This is how we do the business. We use the self-assessment checklist to go back and check as well. What are we doing well in? What can we improve in? What are we missing? So that I guess that ability to go back and have a look and hey, we actually could do better in this part of the business. But a lot of it as well around culture, exactly that. When someone says, no, this is all good, you don't need to worry about this, it's like, I need to worry about that.
Yeah.
Always. Although I think I did find one where it was nothing to see here and there really wasn't. It was,
Get them to look at it. They might
We'll take a look.
But in terms of communities, so I guess when we started our integrity journey, we called it, we had a real lack of, we didn't have really any prevention education. Even our response was a little bit disjointed. So we kind of sat down and did a bit of a stock take about where are we, what have we got, what does, really good look like, and then kind of tried to map out, well, how do we get from A to B, or A to T, and what are the little steps in between, and then tried to work out, well, how are we going to go about getting there? What's the important things? What are going to be the enablers to do the next bit? Hands up if there's anyone here who believes that they have enough resource, and if Sharyn offered you some more FTE, you wouldn't take it. Yeah, no one. Everyone.
Just as well, because I'm not offering.
That was the first job test. No, but everyone will. You're up against a really hard audience in terms of hey, we want to do this. Here's the reason for it. We just need some more dollars. We just need some more FTE to do it. Like it's a very hard battle, regardless of whether it's integrity, service delivery, whatever it is. So essentially, a little bit of a stock take. Where do we want to get to? How do we do that? And then celebrating the small wins, but a really large amount as well of going out and working with the DG, the executive, the tier 3s, the tier 4s, and this is what we can do for you. We're here to help. There's no, we had a very clear message as well. There's no wrong door. Hey, you've come to us. Thanks for coming to the blue door. You need the green door. It's down the road. We'd actually, hey, we'll go and sort it out and get them to contact you. So it was partly about, being overly friendly, being overly nice, which did create more work for us, but really helped break down some of those barriers. Gave us an opportunity as well to have a chat to people about, hey, what is your business area? What are you doing? What are some of the risks? What are some of the things that you might see? And hey, we can come and help you with some other stuff as well that might make your world a bit easier. So that being nice, I guess promoting as well. It can be quite uncommon.
I hadn't thought of that.
It can be quite uncommon in the public service, unfortunately, in some pockets. But it's about demonstrating and working with people. Hey, this is your work. We can add value to that work here. And then when you do have that win, so if I go and do something with Lanie and it works really well, using Lanie to try and sell that message to her peers as well about this is, hey, Andrew and the team came in, we did X, Y, Z. It was really useful. So you get that snowballing effect as well.
And I think we should acknowledge Department of Communities. I had to go down and read the Riot Act. I don't know if you were there at that point.
No, that was before my time.
Probably relieved you weren't there. A really come to Jesus discussion about, Paul White, is the poster boy for all the bad things that happened. But underneath that was really a bit of a cottage industry absence of attention and structure and everything. And so I think setting high expectations is just so important. And so it was a really uncomfortable discussion, not for the integrity people, for the executive, whose responsibility it actually is. And so I just really want to congratulate the department for what they've done. They've really grabbed it and gone with it, and they've had hard yards, so I just want to publicly acknowledge their good work.
Thank you. If I can as well, we also set up, we used to go along to our executive meeting once a quarter and talk about integrity for 20 or 30 minutes. We actually set up a quarterly meeting with just the executive, chaired by the DG, so that he has ownership of integrity. And it's basically an hour with the executive just focused in on our core business. So we get to sell, hey, this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing well, this is our plan, where we want to get to, next quarter, next month, next year, or even a couple of years down the track. And then a little bit of feedback from them about how are we going? Are there areas we're missing? What do we need to build in? So that helps get that ownership and then sets that, that tone from the top, not just from the DG, but from their executive, and then working down through the tiers as well, which again, all helps with that workplace culture.
Thanks. So one of the questions we had in the earlier session from someone in the room was about how do integrity practitioners within departments get their leaders engaged in this work? And obviously all of you are particularly engaged, and off the back of a crisis it's easy to get people engaged. and short of you, Sharyn, going and reading every department the Right Act, how can people in this room frame the risks and misconduct and work that needs to happen to get their executive engaged? Lanie?
I think it's a special relationship that exists between the Director of Integrity and the Director General. I think that's a really critical relationship of trust, like Sharyn was referring to before. So being able to have, so I can talk about Michael because we'd worked together for such a long time. Michael is like the eyes and ears of what's going on in the organisation. So he will tell me things about what he's seeing and what he's feeling about what he sees, and we'll have a discussion about what we think that means, and then sometimes we'll have a discussion with you, Emma, about what that means. But having that ability to be able to have that trust relationship that exists where you feel like you can say, even if it's just a hunch, that you can say what's going on, which I think is part of your being nice approach, is you get to develop trusting relationships with the business areas more broadly. You also get to see things from a different angle that DGs don't necessarily get to see because everyone wants to show us the best of what they are. So you sometimes get to see things coming back with that approach. I think just in terms of the scenario about expectations, but I think is really, really critical. And I think when I started at DLGSC, we were 3 months into Royal Commission. Within 3 weeks, I was on the stand at the Royal Commission, which is, I don't know how many of you have been on the stand. If there's someone here from police, you might have been, but I don't know how many people have been on the stand in a Royal Commission. It is not the kind of thing that you ever want to experience, and particularly not in your first job as a Director General 3 weeks in. But what became really obvious really, really quickly about the journey that organisation was on, and that probably the Department of Racing and Gaming had been on prior to the machinery government in 2017, is that things that were going on were not necessarily going on in secret. It was common knowledge and they were hiding in plain sight. And that was harder for people then to call out because they were isolated, siloed culture and they had lived on their own. Power was centralised in the Director General and the Deputy Director General. And when with fresh eyes going in there, I said, it's not appropriate for you to own a greyhound syndicate amongst the people who are responsible for gaming regulation. Well, there's no written thing that says that we can't own a greyhound. I'm saying the fact that we're even having this conversation, I feel like I've just arrived from another planet, you know. But even, you know, obviously it's in the public domain. You know, Michael Connolly's evidence and the information that was given about him in the public domain. No one in this room would have thought that it's okay for him to be going on fishing trips with the regulated entity regulatory representatives. But he thought it was okay. And the people who worked with him thought it was okay. And some of those people still work at the department today because they didn't do anything wrong, but they were just involved in a culture where people thought that those things were okay. So that is a fascinating piece of culture, I think, where people reinforce to each other. And that's why it's important that we have rotation, that we have new people, fresh eyes, that we have these public sector reforms, because it breaks that up and gives an opportunity to revise it.
And Andrew and Sharyn, anything else for the practitioners in the room about how to influence, you know, leaders who may not be so engaged in this space?
Well, I think for us, it's been, you know, part of that being nice is about building trust. So, you know, being helpful to the executive, you know, what are your issues? What are you encountering? What can we do to, you know, to make that world a little bit easier for you, or to minimise some of the risks for them, but then engage with them as well. So, you know, if you say you're going to do something, just make sure you do it. It can be very easy to commit to something and then, you know, kind of work gets in the way, and before you know it, that's kind of dropped off. I think it's really important, particularly when you're trying to build that relationship, to, if you commit to something, to follow it through and then feed it back and try and celebrate the wins with, you know, with the executive, but with their teams or the people involved as well. Yeah, and importantly, don't bite off more than you can chew. Start on something small. Simple change management. Start on something small. Celebrate those wins, and then use that to try and gain a bit more momentum to make the bigger differences that are really going to make the change that you want.
How do you get the attention of people who are spinning 50 plates and dancing at the same time and visiting ministers while they're doing all that? It's a really hard task and it's not just this group. I have the same question from the Crows, from the finance people. How do you get the attention without fabricating a crisis? Because that certainly will get their attention. So I'm not suggesting you do that. One of the things in 2026 I want people, and I'll be talking to the CEOs about this, is their use of their own data and just being curious about their own data. We've done this ourselves, system level, looking at the data. What are the reports coming in? What are the nature of the reports? But ask the questions, what's not coming, right? That's what I want the executive, what's the silence around? So having a look at your data and just ask 10 more questions over it. And if you don't have any data or you don't have any reports, that's another. So you need to find a way to upwardly articulate the risk of either what's the data telling you or what it's not telling you. So something about that, it has to be seen as a major organisational risk. We have it on every corporate executive, something I insisted on. So I think that's really important, articulating it upwards as a risk. And then the other thing you said, Lanie, so database, data evidence, evidence-based, but also intuition as well. And finding perhaps the person that's going to listen the most, if it's not the Director General, finding your challenge. Yeah. This is upward management 101 for people in the public sector. You've got to find something that gets in their mind when they've got a million other things to worry about. And so some of it's going to be your skill about how you articulate it. They should be worrying, and don't worry, I'll be coming this way down, so don't worry about that. You might be wishing you hadn't asked this question because I'm going to be coming downward with some questions of Director Generals, and so be ready for that. You might have more questions than you want. It's a really, that upward management is a really difficult thing to do, but they have responsibilities and you've got skills, but work out how you're going to capture their attention. 50 pages of dense data, handing it over. Okay, well, I'm already up to midnight, so you're asking me now to do it till 1 in the morning. No thanks. Dashboard, something that captures their attention. Be a bit creative as well, I think.
Can I talk about data for a minute? And
Yes,
our
I know you
conversation.
like
Emma
data,
and I
Lanie,
talk about
please.
this all the time. So one thing so every time I come for my quarterly meeting, I say, Emma, I've got all this data. Can I give you all this data, and then you can find all the things that we can't find?
Does she really do that?
Yeah. Like I'm like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? So secondary employment, right? So we rely on people's self-declaration of the fact that they've got a secondary income stream. So how's that working out for us all? Yeah. So we have access to the ASIC database for business for director registrations. How about we give you all our employee data, and then you drag down on the ASIC database, and we work out how many people are running businesses from home, probably running businesses from work as well, because their company is registered to that address. So these are ways that integrity directors can get the attention of Director Generals. Every time you come to see us, give me 3 new ideas of things that we're not doing currently that would help us to weed out integrity issues within our organisation. So that's one. There's a whole range. I could go on and on and on about the opportunities that we've got to catch people doing things. I don't know how many of you walk the floor and see this. I see a lot of that, a lot of this. I'm pretty sure those people are not using their private device to be able to work out how to write the ministerial that they need to write. But we all have a problem with resourcing, yeah, we don't have enough resources. But I'm pretty confident that we do have enough resources. The resources that we've got just aren't being used because they're being, in some occasions, siphoned off by people who are using work resources for personal gain, for personal means. So, for example, ask your DG to ask the question of managers, when was the last time as an executive director in this agency you asked for a data dump and analysis on internet usage within your area? And I bet you, well, I don't bet, well, I do bet, but I'm not going to bet you, but I bet you that most of them wouldn't even know that they could actually do that. But I bet you if they did do that, they would find that there are people in the organisation whose number one website access is afl.com.au. Now, I'm a massive
Sports
Eagles fan, yeah, sports bet, yeah. But most people's codes will say minimal personal use, not the average time that he spent or she spent on afl.com.au in the last month was an hour a day.
So
of work
while
time.
Andrew was saying be nice, I was going to jump in and say, but sometimes don't be,
Yeah.
right? Ask the counter question.
Yeah.
All of the things Lanie's talking about, be creative, generate lines of inquiry. Director Generals, they're pretty clever people. If you're putting up all of these questions and they're never taking you up and looking into it, they're going to feel something about that, because if something goes wrong, you've advised, they haven't done it. So, I think, I remember Commissioner McKechnie did that red flags thing. CCC, if you don't know about that, the common things to look at for the people who are always not taking leave. Oh, actually, I think I'm one of them. Those lines of inquiry, offer them up, and the executive should be talking about that. Be creative, share it amongst yourselves, come up with, the 20 lines of inquiry for executives. You don't know what to do it on your own. Yeah, make people curious. They will respond.
And I think take advantage as well of opportunities. Never let a good crisis go to waste, but hopefully you don't have to experience that. But if another agency does, and Emma's agency puts out a report, go through it. Hey, these are the things that weren't in place for the agency. This is where we are. Hey, we need to do A, B, and C. And present that back up. So it's hey, this could be us. Next 6 months or next year. Let's try and get in front of the 8 ball before it bowls us over, and that can be a really good avenue as well to get into the DG or the EDs or the business area that you need to work with. And I think while I'm talking, in terms of Sharyn's just mentioned about red flags as well, something that Communities, Tina's team has done is really promote the red flags, so going out with managers but with staff as well. These are the things to look out for in people, and 99% of the time it's not that they're doing something bad, it's that it's like Are You OK Day, they've got something going on in their life, but it just means that person, their behaviour's changed, something's going on for them, it's a chance to have a chat to them, offer them some support, anything from the EAP to take a break, working part-time, changing roles, it really depends on what's going on for the person, because that can then prevent that person from making a poor decision, which then puts them in the integrity space. Or they make a poor decision, which doesn't put them in our space, but then they cover it up, which does. Or the other thing is they make a poor decision, they justify it to themselves, and then they make a poorer decision, justify it to themselves, and before you know it, you have Emma's team knocking on your door saying, hey, we've got a world of hurt for you. So it's, try and take advantage of that. Try and, go out and have a chat to managers, have a chat to people. Who have you got that has changed their behaviour? Let's go and have a chat to them. But I think really try and take advantage of where you see an opportunity, particularly in another agency or something going on in the news. Is this relevant to us, and what could we learn from this?
Thanks, Andrew. And Commissioner mentioned earlier, Commissioner, that we'll be making more recommendations in reports going forward. And those, while they will be, in relation to the particular investigation in an agency, they will almost always be applicable to most agencies. And pulling them out will be a really simple way, I think, to have a little bit of an audit of your own practices and see whether you actually are doing the things that we're recommending in some of these matters. So that should hopefully assist as well going forward. One question that came up earlier today was about people leaving public sector agencies during disciplinary investigations and the difficulty that poses to agencies, and there is a discretion about whether or not to continue, but would like to hear all of your thoughts on that issue. And Sharyn, if you don't mind touching on the long heralded register of public sector employees, which I know is not anyone's favourite topic, but is seen as a potential solution, although it may not be the panacea we all hope it to be.
Yeah. So my base proposition, and I'll look at all my team and they'll nod or say something else, is my preference is to pursue people after they've left. Now, sometimes that doesn't work for different reasons, but that's my preference because often, eventually, they're coming back. I'm not a strong supporter of referee checks. What I mean by that, yes, they're part of the system, but you're an idiot if you choose someone that's not going to say you're wonderful, right? So it's a bit of an intelligence test for me, number one. I do all of my own third-party endorsements around the referee checks as well because they're set up to give the best view of someone, right? So I'm looking for the anti-view. Sorry. Nice and mean all at once. So the system's not perfect, right? Because it's a lot, there's self-declaration built in there. So if you work on the basis that that person, if you don't pursue and follow it through, could be coming back to you one day or someone else, which you should care more about as well. I think you should do what you can to follow it through, even though you can't apply a penalty. That's right, team? Melissa? Anyway, she can tell you later. Or you might not be able to apply a penalty, perhaps is a better way to say it. So then the register, we were asked to explore a register, a pre-employment screening arrangement, and whether we end up with one, whether it's a register or some other approach. The point being that in recruitment, people take more information into consideration about whether someone's been subject, with findings, for misconduct and discipline and other things. It sounds fantastic. I've met with all the commissioners around Australia. Some only do it, and to varying extents because it is not straightforward. And there's a whole range of considerations to take into account, including can someone ever redeem themselves? Yeah. Can they ever learn and grow and be better? In our worlds, a lot of the assumption is that they can't. So there's a lot, and just the administration of it, agencies keeping it up to date, who can access it, the privacy concerns, you can talk to my team later. There are lots of issues with it, so we're still working on what that could be. But if you go from the premise that we want to know upfront, in recruitment is the best place to weed people out. So, referees asking questions, being really curious in that, and everyone using probation for what it's intended, because once people are in, it's harder to get them out, right? I don't think people use probation strongly enough. I would really focus on probation as well. Because once, the employment register is not the front end, it's the front end of recruitment, but it's better to performance manage people in the first instance, use probation, do all that. So there's a long way to, there's some way to go yet before we have something in place. I'm talking to the Premier ongoing about what that might be.
Yeah, we pretty much do now, as it's almost become standard practice. We'll follow stuff through under CI4, Commissioner's Instruction 4. So, it's quite common for people to go through the discipline process and then resign just before the outcome. We'll follow those through so that there's a record. But the point that we would promote is around the screening. So good screening will save you a whole world of, pain and resource in removing the person from the department. And part of that is around having some really good questions up front. So I tend to agree with Sharyn about the referee reports. I have come across one or two who have used people who've said, "Oh God, no, I would never touch them again." It's like, yeah, intelligence test. But you know,
And not everyone's honest either.
No.
You know, I think there's a dishonesty in referee checks that I abhor, actually. And if I ever inherit one from you, on the basis of I'm coming for you. Because
Always tell Sharyn the truth.
Because I think that's you know, in my words, lacking integrity. If you're willing to push someone on and you say they're good at what they do and you know they're not, I just think that's a baseline integrity issue for me.
Yeah, but I guess essentially we would tend to use CI4, but really promote the upfront screening. So try and keep out the people that you don't want. You know, try and prevent the discipline investigation end. So some questions about, you know, all of the usual ones. Tell us about yourself, but then, hey, I consent to, you know, the department going back to my previous employers to ask about my performance, my discipline history. Which means that if they are recommended, we can go back. But it also means that, you know, 6 months down the track, hey, Andrew's a bit of a problem. There's this going on. We can go back to you know, my previous employer, and can you tell us about Andrew? Here's his written consent, and then we find out that actually he's lied in the employment, you know, the recruitment process. So automatically we've gotten out because they've lied in that process. So it can save a lot of work further down the track. And of course, some people will self-select out. You know, do you have a discipline history? I don't really need that job.
Yeah.
So I'm always like Churchillian, you know, never, ever, ever give up. Like, because if nothing else, it is going to be a deterrent effect for others, and it shows to whoever's, you know, it shows to SSO and to our employee relations team that their work is never in vain. They will always carry it through, because there's nothing to lose from our perspective once we've got that far. Just on the clearances, so I've been asking for, I feel like it's 5 years now. I still don't have an answer to this, but the NPCs for intake really only kicked off, I think, you guys would know, I think we were only like 2019 or something like that we had consistent NPCs for entry. And NPCs in themselves aren't going to tell you everything that you need to know, but NPCs have only been in for that time. In my department, there's 1,600 people, many of whom started there as graduates and are now in their late 50s. And they've never, ever had an NPC. So I don't know what's going on within my agency in terms of people with records who wouldn't be able to get in now, but have actually, you know, and wouldn't be suitable for certain positions. So we need to look at that. We also need to look at renewals of those for people who are in. So how often are we doing renewals? And then we need to look at what is our security clearance arrangements for people who have access to certain information. So Trellis, for example, you know, I've got a list now because of the issues with Trellis around people passing information from one officer to another. Now in the delegations, I'm asked to approve 30 people for Trellis access. I'm just like, this is just alarming, the amount of people know Trellis is the registration system that Transport has. So I think we really need to be smarter inside agencies, and once again, it's something that Integrity can work with HR around in terms of bringing forward tangible opportunities to reduce risk in our agency, decisions that we can make to roll those sorts of things out. So, yep, strong believer in all that stuff, as you know.
Thanks, Lanie. So we might go to questions from the floor now. If you have a question, put your hand up, and Finn will come around with the microphone. It's a rare opportunity to have these three people in front of you, so use it if you can.
While you're thinking of a question, I might just share a conversation I had with my new entrants. I meet with all of the new, we're only 150, so I can do it, meet with all the new entrants, and we had a really interesting discussion. It was on the back of, I'd just come from a discussion with the DG about not great integrity issue, so I was kind of a bit fired up. So I did the welcome, you know, I just want to be clear about integrity. You know, there's no, you know, we have a threshold, and you know, can't go over it. So I'll just describe it, I'm saying to them. There were 19 of them or something, or 15. Between this time and this time, you are ours. Everything you do between that time and that time belongs to the government. Your time, your effort, your energy, the equipment you're using, the phone calls, the information you're generating, everything belongs to the government. The computer, you know, I went through it all, and they're all just... and I kind of softened, when I realised how terrified they were. But I was just making the point, because people don't realise, you know, well, the three of us will wander down to the cafe. We arrive at 9 and we wander down to the cafe and we come back at 9:30. That's 30 minutes of my time. Don't tell me how under pressure you are. Not that I mind people going and having coffee. The computers, you know, sports bet on the computer every Friday doing it. It was a really interesting discussion to narrow down what we mean, because a lot of people don't actually understand or think of it at a base level. Intellectual property. We have a lot of people who develop things in the workplace, they move to another job and they want to take it with them. No, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the government, the department you're working for. So and we ended up having a really very positive and interesting discussion about that whole idea, because they'd never thought of it like that before. And of course there's reasonable use, but I think a lot of the problems that I see is that people, they think it's all about the Paul White rip-off of the world. Yeah. They don't think it's about the fact that I've, you know, taken 3 notebooks home, or that, you know, my husband works for someone and I just happen to be, you know, regulating them. Yeah, so it was a really interesting discussion. I'd encourage you just to kind of think about your on-entry people and the standard you set for them and the discussion you have with all of your new people.
I think that's so true, Sharyn, that linkage point for you guys with human resources, employee relations. I think Georgina's here somewhere. Georgina. So when Georgina moved from employee relations to integrity and then back to employee relations and then back to integrity, I think now, she's wearing both hats, It's so important because proper performance management by all HR, by all managers within the agency goes hand in glove with setting those standards and making sure that people are held to account. Otherwise, it starts to rot.
Sorry, we jumped in on the questions.
Sorry.
Well, I guess just on that, while you're getting the microphone, yeah, exactly that. So we have a triage committee. It involves all of HR, ER, IR, WHS, plus us. And the majority of people who come to us for discipline are known to, you know, they're poor performers, they've got WHS claims, you know, people tend not to come as a clean skin, they've got other stuff. So involving integrity with HR and the other areas means you can just address the person holistically. You're not stepping on each other's toes, or you're not doing, you know, I think when I started, we had a couple of people that we called Polly, as in Polly Farmer, best handballer on field. You know, so it kind of, it helps overcome some of those issues. But there's a question.
You've basically just almost answered my question. One thing that I've noticed is there's an inherent friction between integrity practitioners and chief people officers or heads of HR. We want to essentially see people, if we can, moved on and deal with the risk completely, and there's some restrictions when it comes to fair work and what we can do with employees that are the subject of, say, serious misconduct or misconduct allegations. How do you propose influencing CPOs and HR practitioners to help them understand and see how the integrity space operates, and especially the really emerging field of prevention and education?
Yep, so we've had, I mean, we've been through that. So probably the initial part of that was around the earlier question about how do you influence, you know, the DG or the executive, in this case, you know, the CPO and the executive in that team. So it's about demonstrating that, you know, hey, you manage substandard performance, which is this, and then I guess for us, we kind of mapped out, this is what we manage. We manage discipline. So, you know, yes, some substandard performance has some discipline elements to it, but essentially, I guess the message that we've driven home is that if the matter's found to have occurred, and a likely outcome would be, you know, dismissal, reduction in level, transfer, then it'll go to investigation. If not, then we'll take improvement action, deal with it then and there. Because, you know, it's partly about relevance to the time that the incidents happened, but also about resource. Why would we spend all of this time, money, resource, upset, not just the person, but the business area, and cause all of that unrest, that impact on workplace culture, to ultimately come back and go, actually, here's a improvement action letter, just deal with it then and there. So making clear about this is our lane, that's your lane, and of course, most people, or a lot of people in our experience, tend to swim in both lanes. So how do we work together? And then getting some agreement about, well, we'll deal with this bit, you deal with that bit, and then just keeping some communication. But to be honest, there was a bit of fisticuffs on both sides at the start as well. But it's partly been at officer level, officers working together well and keeping each other informed, and partly my level of the CPO about keeping that I guess my job is to sell the work my team does.
Can I say, I think in those of you working in a regulatory context, so regulators will publish, most good regulators will publish a regulatory posture. So it says, what is our approach? What is my approach to this particular issue? Now, in the case of state government departments, it's really, really important, I think, for people to recognise that the CEO or the Director General is the employing authority. So they are the decision maker with regard to matters, not the Chief Human Resource Officer, not the Director of Integrity. It's important that there is alignment between what the employing authority wants as the regulatory posture for the agency, and then alignment of the people working in that space. I think that's really, really essential, because otherwise, if that's not right, we've got different people in the organisation sending different messages about what our tolerance level is, what our approach level is. Just give an example on that, in data again, where I wanted regular data analytics on internet usage across the agency, and then a threshold test for if you're an executive director and you've got this amount of problem with people misusing resources in your area. It's not a matter of whether you want to do something about it, it's you need to do something about it. But at the time, this was a couple of years ago now, at that time, the person running our corporate services area, responsible for a couple of those areas, had a diametrically opposed view. So his view was, but people have got rights to privacy. And I said, yeah, when they're on their own personal device in their own home. But literally, that person supervised the Crow and the CIO, and so I was in a position of they were being given one message about resisting what the employing authority. We eventually settled it, but it was extremely unpleasant because of that. Just people coming at it from a different angle. So I think that's really important to remember.
I think it's okay to have a little bit of tension, because the decision maker, Lanie in this case, should be getting advice through various areas, and then you need to make a decision. And the thing that we haven't mentioned, and I think I've saw Kirsten somewhere, where are you, Kirsten, there, who's helped me out on a few occasions, is not to forget the legal advice as well. And just while I'm on that, and I mentioned to Emma earlier, I've got a concern in some quarters about the quality of the outsourced investigations that are happening across the sector. Be mindful of that as well. So, yeah, they should be collaborative. I think it's okay for Director Generals to get different points of view about what should happen. They need to be well informed. Build in the legal advice as well.
Questions from the floor?
Thank you. Thank you to CCC for organising this event. It has been really, really enlightening. And there is always to learn, as you say, Sharyn. Well, I've been in the public sector for a long time. I thought I've seen it all, but now you see something new every time. There is a lot of lessons learned when something happens. But I hear now that there is a lot of proactive, positive action as well. I think more than a question is probably a suggestion that we could capture that as well, so that we come from a positive, proactive angle, not just addressing and fixing what was wrong to begin with.
We do proactively thematic reviews and, theme sample of agencies. So we're constantly, continuous improvement is where we're coming from. Agency capability reviews is another source. All of the CCC's reviews just support what Emma said. When you get one of those, as a team, you need to go through it and put up to your corporate executive, what is our position in relation to this? Use it as a self-assessment all of the time. There's lots of different ways. So there are a lot of lessons that are out there through often reviews and recommendations that agencies should test themselves against and work out where they're at. But look, obviously it's a good suggestion. Continue to learn from everyone. I think people are often creating the same thing. You could save yourself a bit of time by joining up.
Question probably to PSC in terms of what we're doing for portability of leadership and SES positions across the sector, and then supporting those leaders as they step into roles to understand that there is a wider, or the importance of that role, particularly now we're looking at integrity, but many other things, and then how that knowledge gets transferred, because some are exceptional, and like everything, some are new and they're willing to learn. So where are those opportunities coming in to try and pollinate that information across the sector somehow, and showcasing the positive things that can happen when you do have the events that will stimulate. So negative events naturally stimulate an activity and an action. So we've got 2 people here that have been through a crisis and they're responding to that. And then you've got people that have never been through that, so they're living in, having a life where that doesn't affect them, and they just hope every day that it doesn't happen. And confirmation bias and optimism bias will say that it won't, because we've got it all under control. I just wonder how we're dealing with that leadership level and the SES.
Yeah. So thanks. It's a good question. It's a question I'm going to answer in 2 parts. My initial reaction is, well, your heads of agencies are responsible for the SES in that sense, so my question would be to them, what are you doing about it? But the underneath part of your question is really important. When we look at leadership, we know, by and large, a lot of leaders get into the SES on the back of their dense knowledge, expertise in a particular technical area, and they often arrive in a leadership job and don't know that much about leadership. So there's a job for us all there, and we play a big part in the SES management and oversight and professional learning in that. So we build it into our professional learning. We have SES conversation series and sessions, and they're about broadly lots of things, but sometimes they're about integrity matters. So I think from our perspective, we try and build it into course design. It's actually not that easy to get SES people to come to an integrity event, I'm just saying. So we can make them come, we can do introductory work with them, but I think the point that you're making, and I take it on board, and I think it's a really good one, is a lot of SES people don't understand CCM, discipline, because they've never been involved. And as an educator, I know you can run them through a course, but until they're in the moment, it doesn't really register that well. Scenarios are a good way of doing it. Case studies are a good way of doing it. And as I said, we build that into some of our work. It's a challenge, is really what I want to say to you. So if you're at level 9 for the first time, and I invite you to come to an integrity course, you're taking it all in. It's not really relevant until something happens. So how do you make that switch? I think it's something about lifting the expectations on SES, which only the Director Generals can do, that how they're managing. So rather than make it theoretical, here's something to go to, building in an expectation. The sorts of things that Lanie is talking about, I think, are really important. So rather than just broadly, have more integrity, teaching them the discipline of asking more and more questions. Spanish Inquisition. That's what I would like SES to know more about. Just ask more and more questions. So that's kind of a critical thinking discipline in the integrity space, if you like.
I think there's also a role, for us feeding up as well a little bit earlier around that, asking, get going and doing a bit of an intro, an induction section for new people into the agency, new SES people in. This is what we do, this is who we are, but then, regular meetings and going back and, are you aware that this is going on, or that this is an issue? Hey, you've got 20 of these, what is your internet? What is the internet use for your staff? Hey, how many of your staff do this? How many of your systems don't have this control? Starting to ask some of those difficult questions as well. So I guess, I say be nice, but you can ask difficult questions in a nice way, is kind of what I'm saying as well. And sometimes it will be, like part of my role as well is sometimes is about having a bit of a verbal fisticuffs with people about, no, you actually, this is what's happening and this is the process, and that's, this is my lane and that's your lane and you need to get back in your lane. Or actually, no, this is my lane and it's also your lane at the moment and you need to get into the lane and come with the team on that journey. So, but it's about trying to win those people over, and sometimes you just got to be a little bit forceful in that. But I would tend to say it's always better to be nice up front and win people over.
Just stop there. That's good. It's always better to be nice. That's a great way. That's a great note to end on.
That's a perfect way to end the panel discussion, I think. So please join me in thanking our panel members for today.